migrate, migrate, migrate. So, let's dive into the word migrate. As a verb, migrate typically means to move from one place to another, usually in search of food, water, or better living conditions. Common usage includes animals, such as birds and monarch butterflies, that travel seasonally between their summer and winter homes. It can also be used to describe humans moving from one country to another for work, education, or personal reasons, often with the intention of settling permanently in the new location. What's interesting is that migrate implies a permanent move, unlike the more temporary movement implied by verbs like travel or visit. Let's say we're discussing the topic of animal movements with a friend who loves zoology. As we're chatting over coffee, I'll use the word migrate in different ways to illustrate its practical usage. So, if we were talking about birds flying south for the winter, I might say something like, "Did you know that many species of songbirds migrate from North America to Central and South America every year? It's amazing to think about all those tiny creatures making such long journeys." Here, I'm using the word migrate in a casual conversation to describe a natural phenomenon. In contrast, if we were discussing a proposal for relocating endangered species due to climate change, I might say, "The research suggests that these animals will need to migrate to higher elevations or face extinction, which is why conservation efforts are so crucial." Here, I'm using the word migrate in a more formal and technical sense. Lastly, if we were discussing business strategies with a colleague who's interested in relocating our company's operations to a different region, I might say, "Our team will need to migrate all of our data and systems to the new location before the transition can take place, which will require significant planning and resources." So you want to learn about this process of people moving from their usual home to another place? Okay, let me explain. When people move from one country or region to another for good, it's like they're starting fresh in a new place. They take all their belongings with them and usually leave behind family, friends, and everything familiar. This often happens when someone is looking for better job opportunities, education, or just a change of environment. The main characteristic is that it's a long-term move, not just a short visit. Similar concepts might be relocate or transplant, which are basically the same thing, moving permanently to a new place. When people do this, they're essentially building a new life in a new location. Minimum, minimum, minimum. Let's talk about the word minimum. As an adjective, it refers to the smallest amount or quantity that is needed or allowed in a particular situation. In common usage, you'll often see minimum used to describe requirements, such as the minimum age for something like driving or voting. For example, the store has a minimum purchase of $20 required for free shipping. It's also used to describe limits or restrictions, like the minimum speed limit on highways. What's important to note is that minimum can be easily confused with minim, but they have different meanings. While minimum refers to the smallest amount, maxim, not minim, would be the opposite, referring to the largest or greatest amount. Here are 3 practical example sentences using the word minimum. At the job interview, the interviewer asked me, "What is the minimum amount of education required to be eligible for this position?" I replied, "A bachelor's degree in any field is the minimum requirement, but relevant work experience and skills are also highly valued." This example illustrates a formal Usage of minimum in a professional context. Later that day, while grabbing lunch with my friend, she said, "I'm only going to order a burger and fries. It's the minimum I can eat at this place without breaking the bank." In this casual conversation, minimum is used to convey the bare essentials or the lowest possible amount. It implies that we don't have to spend any more than necessary. In my economics class, we discussed how the government aims to raise a certain amount of revenue from taxes each year. And the professor explained that they strive to collect at least 10% of GDP as a minimum, while ideally aiming for a higher percentage. In this academic or business context, minimum is used to convey a baseline requirement or threshold, below which it's not acceptable to fall. So you want to know about this concept that refers to the smallest amount or quantity of something. Well, think of it like the lowest rung on a ladder. It's the absolute bottom limit, where anything less just isn't possible. When we talk about this idea, we're usually talking about the bare essentials, the smallest number or amount that can be considered sufficient for a particular task or situation. For example, if you need to pay a certain fee to join a club, and the most basic membership level requires at least $10, then that's the minimum amount of money you'll have to spend. It's similar to concepts like threshold, something you need to cross before you can enter or start something new, but with this idea, it's more about the smallest starting point. In everyday life, we use this concept to talk about things like prices, fees, and even basic requirements for a job or course of study. Ministry. 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 So, you want to learn about the word ministry. Okay, let me break it down for you. The part of speech is a noun, which means it refers to a person, place, thing, or idea. In common usage, a ministry usually refers to a government department or organization responsible for a specific area, such as education, health, finance, or defense. Think of it like this. In many countries, there's a Ministry of Education that oversees schools and educational policies. The word is also sometimes used more broadly to refer to any organization or group dedicated to a particular cause or mission, like a ministry for the environment or social justice. One special note about its usage is that it can sound a bit formal or official sounding. So you might see it used in contexts where other words, like department or organization, wouldn't quite fit. I'd be happy to provide some examples of how the word ministry can be used in different contexts. You know, my cousin's wife just started working at the Ministry of Education, and I was talking to her about it. She said that she loves her new job as a liaison officer, helping to coordinate between schools and the government. For example, when you're having a formal conversation with someone, you might say something like, "The Ministry of Health has issued a statement regarding the recent outbreak of cases." This sounds really official and serious, doesn't it? On the other hand, in a more casual setting, like a dinner party, you might hear something like, "My brother-in-law just got a new job at the ministry. I'm not sure what that means, but he seems pretty excited." Here, the word ministry is used to refer to the government department where your cousin's husband works. And it sounds like a pretty cool perk. So you want to know about that government department responsible for overseeing and coordinating various activities related to a specific area of public life? That's a good place to start. The main characteristics of this type of organization are that it's an official part of the government, responsible for providing guidance, support, and sometimes even direct services to citizens. It's often headed by someone appointed by the government to oversee its work. This concept is similar to things like a department or a bureau in other countries. And in our language, we might also call it an agency, or simply a government office. As for what it does, this type of organization is usually responsible for making sure certain laws or policies are being followed, and that people have access to the information and resources they need. Does that make sense?